All right, court is calling 2025 CR 003338, State versus Carlos Vasquez Saldana. Could I have parties announced, please?
Megan Galloway and Jason Garahan for the state.
Roberto Vargas for defendant, ready to proceed, Your Honor.
And are you Carlos Vasquez Saldana?
Yes.
All right, oh, you can remain seated. And just so both parties know, I don't take it as a sign of disrespect, but whenever you're making your objections, you can make them seated. It makes it easier for the court reporter to hear. And if you need to approach the witness for some reason, I know you're just not doing it just to do it. So you can feel free to approach the witnesses and you don't have to ask the court's permission.
Thank you, Judge. So without seatbelts, it's just a habit.
Now, I know it takes a lot to stop doing that. All right, we have an interpreter here. If you can raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, you can lower your hand if you'll state your name for the record. All right, Mr. Saldana. All of the documents that I'm going to review with you are in English. Were those documents explained to you in the Spanish language?
Yes.
I mean, did you go over the documents with your attorney?
Yes.
All right. And counsel, do you speak Spanish?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you speak Spanish fluently?
Enough to communicate with my clients, Your Honor.
All right. And were you able to explain these documents to your client in Spanish?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Saldana, did you review the document entitled Jury Waiver Trial Before the Court?
Yes.
And did you understand it? Did you understand it?
Yes.
Right. So did you understand that you are waiving your right to a jury trial? You're telling the court by signing this that you want me as judge to hear the evidence in this case and make a decision on whether you're guilty or not guilty. Do you understand?
Yes.
And did you intend to have me listen to the evidence and make a decision on whether you're guilty or not guilty?
Of course.
The court will find that the defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived his right to jury trial. Counsel, have you received all of the discovery in this case, and did you review it with your client?
Yes, Your Honor.
The court will find that the state is in compliance with discovery. And Mr. Saldana, did you review the application for community supervision with your attorney? Did you understand it and sign it?
Yes.
All right, we can go off the record. For some reason, I have an incident detail report. I don't know how that got to me.
Okay.
I don't know if it's related to this case or not. I haven't
I
looked at
wasn't
it.
sure if that was part of the discovery or she's giving that to me.
Ah, okay.
Oh, I gave it to you. Oh,
Delegate
yeah,
to
that's what
Okay.
happened. I'm sorry.
No, it's not a problem.
And counsel, I didn't read it or anything.
No, you would have fell asleep.
All right, we're back on the record. State, are you prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
And defense, are you prepared to
Your Honor.
proceed? All right, state, do you wish to read the indictment, or counsel, does your client waive the reading of the indictment?
We waived the reading, Your Honor.
All right, then, Mr. Saldana, to the indictment, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest?
No contest.
No.
No, no, no.
Thank
Yeah, we're done.
Not guilty.
All right, and so your attorney has explained to you the difference, counsel. I'm just saying this for the record. Your attorney has explained to you the difference between a no contest plea and a guilty plea?
Yes.
All right, so by pleading guilty, that tells the court that you wish to proceed with a jury trial. Is that I'm sorry, with a bench trial. Is that correct?
Pleading not guilty.
I'm sorry, pleading not guilty. That's telling, I'm sorry, I have 6 things being handed to me. All right. So by pleading not guilty, you're telling the court that you wish to proceed with this bench trial. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, I know that yes is not Spanish. So whenever you speak to me or address the court or say anything, it needs to be in Spanish. Otherwise, we don't need the interpreter. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right. State, do you have any opening statements?
We waive, Your Honor.
Defense, any?
We wait, Your Honor.
I know that technically if they waive their opening statements, you don't get to present opening statements until your case in chief, but we're doing things a little bit differently if there is no objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. State, you may call your first witness.
The state calls Officer Johnston.
Hello. All right. If you'll, there should be a square microphone. If you'll make sure that you put that somewhere in your shirt, it's for the court reporter to hear. And could you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
All right, you can have a seat and make sure you keep your voice up so that I can hear. All right, state, you may proceed.
Please state your full name for the record.
Yale Johnston.
And how are you presently employed?
I'm presently employed with SAPD.
How long have you been with the San Antonio? Does SAPD stand for the San Antonio Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you been employed with SAPD?
2 years.
What type of training did you undergo to become a police officer?
I did the San Antonio Police Academy,
How long was that?
7 months.
What did you learn in the academy?
I learned Code of Criminal Procedure, Penal Code, Traffic Code, and then also identifying narcotics.
Are you a certified peace officer?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is your current title and assignment with the San Antonio Police Department?
I'm currently a patrol officer stationed at the downtown dog watch sub.
And is dog watch the overnight shift?
Yes, ma'am.
What are your duties as a patrol officer with the San Antonio Police Department?
To enforce traffic code, also to take calls.
Okay. Were you employed as a police officer with the San Antonio Police Department on January 2nd and January 3rd of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have the same title and assignment on that day as you do today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And on that day, were you in uniform
Yes, ma'am.
and were you in a marked patrol unit?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall the SAPD case number associated with the case that we're here for today?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, would it help you refresh or did you write a report associated with this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it help you refresh your memory if you had a copy of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes, ma'am.
Who's the author of that document?
I am.
And is it a fair and accurate copy of your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you refresh your memory, just please don't read from it. Can you please state the SAPD case number associated with this call?
Yes, it's gonna be SAPD 25001284.
Okay. And so on January 2nd in the late night hours, were you on patrol on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you conduct a traffic stop?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the location of that traffic stop?
It's gonna be at the intersection of Fredericksburg and Flores.
Is that located in San Antonio, Texas,
Yes, ma'am.
in Bear County?
Yes, ma'am.
And I guess what type of location was it? Was it a residential or on the street?
It was a public roadway on the city streets.
Okay. Do you recall the vehicle that you were attempting to conduct a traffic stop on?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe that vehicle?
It was a black Dodge Challenger.
All right, and what was the reason that you attempted to conduct a traffic stop on that vehicle?
I ran a license plate and then I observed that the registration was expired to the vehicle.
Do you recall the date that the registration came back to you?
It expired in 2023. That's all I remember.
Okay. And so that's 2 years prior to the offense, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And so how did you go about initiating the traffic stop?
So I turned on my emergency overhead lights and then got behind the listed vehicle. And while I was behind the vehicle continued past multiple areas to pull over. Then it finally pulled over.
Okay, and so did the vehicle immediately come to a stop when you initiated your traffic light?
No,
Did you observe anything going on in the vehicle while you were attempting to conduct your traffic stop?
yeah, yes, I observed the driver moving around in the passenger compartment of the vehicle.
Once the vehicle came to a stop, did you make contact with anyone?
I made contact with the driver of the vehicle.
And do you see that person in court today?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you please point to him and identify him by an article of clothing he's wearing?
It's gonna be the gentleman in the orange jumpsuit.
Okay. Were you able to communicate with the defendant?
No,
And why is that?
he only spoke Spanish and I don't know Spanish.
Do you know some words in Spanish?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so, you observed him in the driver's seat, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then what did you do at that point?
I asked him for his driver's license in Spanish and then he didn't give it to me. And then I advised him to step out of the vehicle.
And what was the reason that you asked him to step out of the vehicle?
I asked him to step out of the vehicle because he passed up multiple locations to pull over. And then also him making movements in the passenger compartment of the vehicle, so I had him step out for officer safety.
Okay, and I guess the movements that you observed in what area of the car were?
He was moving over towards the passenger seat near the glove box.
Okay, and those movements that you're describing, what are known as furtive movement?
Yes, I'm affirmative.
And so once you asked the defendant to step out of the vehicle, what was your next step?
I frisked him and then I placed him in handcuffs.
Okay, and then where did you place him?
I placed him in the front of my patrol vehicle.
What did you do?
I asked for a Spanish speaking officer so I can translate.
Did a Spanish speaking officer arrive?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know that officer's name?
Officer Garza.
Did you conduct a search of the vehicle the defendant was driving?
I did.
Under what authority?
Officer Garza notified me that the suspect.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Sustained with regards to hearsay.
Eventually, did you conduct a search on the defendant's vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What did you locate when you searched the vehicle?
I located a glass pipe. Through my training experience, I know that to be used for narcotics. Also, there was narcotic residue inside the glass pipe. And then I continued my search and I located 2 small plastic baggies with a white powdery substance inside.
And then after that, what happened to the vehicle?
The vehicle was then towed and impounded.
And you know what the weight of the bag was on scene?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
The not on scene exactly, no.
Is that reflected in your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what was the weight of the baggies?
The weight of the baggies was 0.7 grams.
Was your car equipped with in-car video on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you wearing a body worn camera on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, no problem.
I'm showing you what's been marked as states exhibits number 1 and 2. Have you, do you know what these are?
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding states exhibit number 1, what is that?
That's gonna be my vehicle equipped camera.
Okay, and states exhibit number 2, what is that?
Is gonna be my body worn camera.
Okay, and have you watched states exhibit number 1 and 2?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you place an identifying mark on them when you watched them?
Yes, ma'am.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of the events as they occurred on the date of the offense?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, the state offers states exhibits 1 and 2 have previously been tendered to defense.
No objection, subject to the agreement we have.
All right, then states exhibit 1 and 2 are admitted without objection. And is this off the record we both had a discussion. We're still on the record, but off the record, yes, off the record, there was a discussion between the state and the defense. Is this one of the videos that has the rights being read in Spanish or no?
No, Judge.
Okay,
These are the two that would be mute.
all right.
Totally.
Okay, then States Exhibits 1 and 2 are admitted without objection.
Permission to publish it.
Granted. And you can watch from that screen, but usually people say there's a glare. You can also watch from here as well.
And just for the record, I am publishing exhibit number 1. Okay, so I'm pausing state exhibit number 1 at 25 seconds. As we see in the state exhibit number 1, the lights are initiated within 25 seconds of the video starting. Can you explain why is that?
I initiated my overhead lights because I already ran the listed vehicle's license plate and the registration already came back as expired.
I'm publishing that at 25 seconds. And so what do we see on the right side of the state exhibit number 1? That was just passed up.
A well-lit gas station.
And what about now?
A well-lit parking lot.
And the person that you identified as the defendant, what is his name?
His name is going to be Carlos Vasquez Saldina.
Was there anyone else in the car?
No, ma'am.
All right, I'm gonna pause state exhibit number 1 at 2 minutes and 56 seconds, excuse me. We see an officer wearing a beanie walking away. Who is that?
That's going to be me, ma'am.
And who is this officer that my mouse is toggling over?
That's going to be Officer Garza.
And who is this person in the red hoodie?
That's going to be Carlos Vasquez Saldina.
Yeah, and so on state exhibit number 2, if we look on your computer screen, what is happening currently?
That is going to be the registration to the vehicle.
Okay, I've paused state exhibit number 2 at 6 minutes and 4 seconds. What is that we see in your hands?
That's going to be a glass pipe used to smoke narcotics.
And I guess, do you recognize that as drug paraphernalia?
Yes, ma'am.
I paused state exhibit number 2 at 7 minutes and 58 seconds. Can you explain what is observed in the back seat?
That looks like a Milwaukee hand drill.
And what is this that my mouse is toggling over?
Clothing items.
In your training and experience, did they appear to be female or male clothing items?
Male clothing items.
I'm pausing state exhibit number 2 at 8 minutes and 12 seconds. It would appear that you're walking back to the driver's side of the vehicle. Can you explain why you are doing that?
Yes, ma'am. While searching the vehicle, I opened up the sunglass holder that's located on the roof of the vehicle inside. And when I opened it up, I observed a small plastic baggie fall out of it. So I went to go on the driver's side to retrieve it.
Okay, and I'm pausing state exhibit number 2 at 9 minutes and 40 seconds. What do we observe in your hands there?
It's going to be a small plastic baggie with a white powder-like substance.
Is there anything significant about the way it's packaged?
Yes, the way it's packaged is commonly used to package the way narcotics are packaged.
Now, after locating these substances and receiving, was a preliminary analysis conducted on scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and after receiving the results of that, did you have probable cause to believe that defendant committed an offense?
Yes, ma'am.
What offense is that?
It's gonna be possession of controlled substance PG1 less than 1 gram.
We pass the witness.
All right, defense.
Thank you. Officer, sometimes my voice drops, so if you can't hear me, just let me know, please.
Yes, sir.
Officer, regarding traffic stops, there's two types, right? Traffic and the other would be equipment stop. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
And in this case, it was an equipment stop, correct?
Yes, sir.
In regard to his driving facts, he was driving normal,
Yes, sir.
nothing suspicious popped out.
The time of day and then also the location.
Well, have you driving at midnight, you're suspicious?
Driving in that area because it's a large narcotic area.
She didn't see no violations. How long were you in that area prior to initiating, running his plates?
I don't recall.
Were there at least 30 minutes to an hour in that area?
So that area is gonna be my district, so I'm the district officer for that area.
Okay, and prior to running his plates, within the last hour prior to that stop, how many plates did you run?
Object to relevance, Your
Overrule.
I'm unsure.
1, 2, 0?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you know if you ran another plate within an hour prior to that stop?
I don't recall.
You don't recall, okay. Now, regarding this vehicle, you stated, well, based on the video, and we've seen the video to refresh your memory, regarding the camera of the vehicle, regarding the video, you didn't see anything there that was manipulated or anything? Is it correct vision?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm saying it, there's no editing or anything on what you saw.
No, sir.
So when you're behind that vehicle and you initiated your stop, prior to him stopping, you seem to be like 2 to 3 cars behind. Would you agree?
The vehicle was next to me.
No, I'm looking prior to when you initiate your stop, put your lights on, and you're following a certain distance. You're like 2 to 3 vehicles behind. Is that correct?
I was behind the vehicle, yes.
Yeah, but you weren't one vehicle behind. You weren't tailing him, correct?
I wasn't right up on him now.
Okay, you're more like 2 or 3 vehicles behind?
Yes,
Okay, and this vehicle has tinted windows on the back. Did you notice that?
yes, sir.
And it's nighttime,
Yes, sir.
and in your report, you state when you initiate the stop, you saw him reaching over to the passenger side to the glove department.
Yes, sir.
You're able to see through that tent, 3 cars behind?
Yeah, so if the front windshield isn't tinted and my headlights are going through the back windshield, I'm able to see through the windshield, the back windshield.
Well, the back windshield's tinted, right?
Yes, sir, but it wasn't completely dark.
Well, when we look it on the video, it looked dark, didn't it?
Yes, sir, but in person, it's a little different.
So what did he do? He had one hand here and he was reaching all the way?
I saw him making furtive movements over to the passenger side.
So he reached all the way like this?
He was making furtive movements inside the vehicle, so
Well, show me one of the movements you saw.
I saw him reaching over
How far?
to the glove box, that whenever I approached the vehicle, the glove box
No,
wasn't.
no, you said you saw him doing it while the car was moving, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so he's driving. You didn't notice any weaving in the vehicle when you were behind him, correct?
No, sir, he was traveling at a slow rate of speed also.
But if someone is reaching that far, it's gonna be, you should expect a little bit of weaving, wouldn't you expect?
I'm not sure.
Now, this stop was what you call a Class C violation, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what you did was what we call a felony stop?
No, sir.
Well, on Class C violations, people usually remain in their vehicle and given a citation, correct?
Not all the time, sir.
I'm asking, on Class C violations, they remain in the car, you give them a citation, and they move on?
No, sir.
In this case, you, When you approached the vehicle, did you see anything in the vehicle that caused you to feel fear for your safety?
I saw the glove box open and the passenger side a little rummage through, so yes.
What did you see?
The glove box open on the passenger side and it being rummaged through.
Being rummaged. What was in the glove box?
I wasn't sure at the time.
Well, when you went back and did the inventory, what was in the glove box?
I'm not sure.
When you want to check your notes?
I didn't locate anything of significance in the glove box.
And the glove box was open. My client was being respectful. Is that correct?
I'm not sure because I don't speak Spanish.
Okay. Well, he was smiling at you and doing everything you asked based on what limited communication y'all had.
Yes, sir.
No time did he show any signs that he was a threat to you?
I was unaware because I pulled him out of the vehicle before that.
That's what I'm asking. Before you pulled him out, there was no signs that he was a threat to you, correct?
He passed up multiple places to pull over, like a well-lit gas station and also a well-lit parking lot, and then pulled off to the side of the road after passing those multiple places. So that also is a reason why I pulled him out of the vehicle.
That's why well, you just stated it was going slow and slow enough where it wasn't trying to evade you, correct?
No, sir, but people that usually pass up multiple places are trying to hide something or also preparing to cause harm to officers.
Well, sometimes they just pick the wrong place to park, correct?
Well, there was multiple places where he pulled over, and through my training, I'm also taught to pull people out of the car if I feel that there's a threat to my life.
Well, you said you're a threat for your life. You didn't pull out your gun when you approached the vehicle, did you?
No, sir, because he put his hand out of the window.
Well, you said that you feel threatened in your life because he didn't stop at these spots. So if you feel threatened for your life, wouldn't you approach him with your gun out?
Not all the time, sir, no.
So you weren't feeling that high of a level of threat where you didn't need the gun out.
No, sir, but I felt enough where I had to pull him out of the vehicle.
Did you pull him out because you didn't understand his communication?
No, sir.
Now, when you pulled him out, did he smell any smell of alcohol?
No, sir.
Are you certified to give a DRE test?
No, sir.
Are you certified to give a DWI test?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when he got out of the vehicle, did you notice that you have an opinion whether he thought he might have been under the influence of a drug?
No, sir.
So you didn't think he was under the influence of a drug at that time?
No, sir.
He did tell you that vehicle wasn't his?
I don't speak Spanish, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Now, when you ran the plate, it also tells you who owns the vehicle, correct?
Correct, sir.
And when you ran the plate and you saw it was expired, who was the owner of the vehicle?
I'm not sure, sir.
You want to check your notes?
It's not on my notes, sir.
You don't note that on your car, on your police report, the owner of the vehicle?
The owner of the vehicle is listed on the report.
I know, but isn't it something you should put in your report?
In the narrative, or?
Or anywhere, ownership of the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
So you didn't follow procedure that night?
The owner is listed on the report, sir.
Who's the owner?
It's gonna be a Maria.
Who?
Maria, her first name?
And the last name?
Carrion?
It's not the same person sitting next to me, correct?
No, sir.
And when you begin to do the inventory of the vehicle, he stated that, oh, start the roll. Oh, yeah, she said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah. I was sorry. That's going off. Ma'am, proceed, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Officer, when you did the inventory, car is quite messy, would you agree?
There is items around the vehicle, yes.
Now, initially, when you did look in the center console, it required you to move some stuff, find that paraphernalia.
Yes, sir.
So it wasn't there in the naked eye where you can see it, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you touched it, was it cold, hot, warm?
I don't remember, sir.
You know? They use gloves, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there was nothing in it, right?
There was only narcotic residue inside.
Residue, right?
Yes, sir.
So that means residue means it's already been smoked and it's gone, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So at this point, we're looking at what, a Class C misdemeanor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But it also gave you the right to continue to search the vehicle, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then when you looked in the back seat, you didn't see nothing in the back seat. Front seat, you didn't see anything. It wasn't until you popped the glasses department up top.
Yes, sir.
Now, in your testimony, you stated that you saw my client reaching toward the glove department. And that's what kind of make you worried. Nowhere there did it say that you reached up to the top of where the glasses are. Is that correct?
No, not saying he didn't, but no.
No. So you didn't see him put anything up in his, where the glasses are, correct?
No, sir.
Or, okay. What is your background education?
I have a bachelor's degree.
And at the time of this stop in January, you were at 2 years or a little less than 2 years on the force?
A little less than 2 years, sir.
You passed the witness, Your Honor.
All right, state.
Judge, I don't have any other further questions for this witness.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Subject recall, Your Honor.
All right, just make sure you're available in case either side wishes to call you. We're going to resume this bench trial on Friday at 9:15.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, the rule has been invoked. You're not allowed to discuss your testimony with anyone.
Yes, Your Honor.
Make sure you leave the microphone behind. Thank you. All right, state, you may call your next witness.
State Police Officer Ray Ariola.
All right, you're still under oath. If you will make sure to keep your voice up because the interpreter has to hear. And if you could speak at the pace I'm speaking at, it'll make it easier for the interpreter to translate.
Yes, sir.
All right, if you'll state your name for the record.
I, Ray Ariola.
All right, state, you may proceed.
Officer Ariola, how are you currently employed?
Currently employed with the San Antonio Police Department. I'm currently assigned to the downtown patrol and I've been on 5 years.
Are you a certified peace officer?
Yes, ma'am.
What are your duties on patrol officer and in terms of the department?
Answering calls for service, whenever a call comes out or, just patrolling the downtown area.
What
Excuse me,
training did you?
Judge, can we raise his volume a little?
All right, if you could speak into the microphone.
This one, ma'am, or
Yes.
this one?
No, that one, the one on your clip is for the court reporter. That one is for the attorneys.
All right, this one better?
What type of training did you undergo to become a police officer with us?
Underwent the SAPD Training Academy,
How long was that?
8 months.
What type of things did you learn in that training?
Traffic, arrest and seizure, just multiple things that are in accordance with the BPOC for the state of Texas. Vertical.
Were you employed as a police officer with the San Antonio Police Department between January 2nd and January 3rd of 2025?
Yes, ma'am.
Was your title and assignment the same on that day as you explained today?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you assigned to a call that was your report today?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember the associated case number associated with that call?
I do not.
Did you make a supplemental report associated with the call?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it help refresh your memory and were able to review that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it a very accurate copy of entries that you made into the case?
Yes, ma'am.
And does it contain your badge number? and
Yes,
name?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you please please, say what the case number associated with the call was?
The case number is gonna be SAPD 2500 1284.
Do you recall where this stop occurred?
I believe it was on Fredericksburg, off of Fredericksburg Road.
Is that located in your perspective?
Yes, ma'am.
On that day, were you working alone or
With a partner.
with your partner?
I had, oh, are you talking about in the patrol car?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was alone in the patrol car.
And I guess can you describe or how you arrived on the scene for a sign to call?
Yes, ma'am. I was driving in the area when I heard that the handling officer was out on a on-site for traffic and for officer safety. I just went over there just to see if there's anything I can assist with.
Once you arrived on the scene, were you wearing a body worn camera on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
So were you confident to operate it?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure you, it's been marked as state exhibit number 3. Can you look at that and tell me if you recognize it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell me what it is?
It's my body worn camera, the footage.
Did you put any identifying marks on it?
Yes, ma'am. My name and the dash number.
Have you reviewed it before?
Yes, ma'am.
And was it a fair and accurate depiction of the events as they occurred on the offense day?
Yes, ma'am.
And except to comply with legal rules, has it been altered?
No, no.
This time I'm referring to the section.
Just the one, just me. Sure. Pursuant to our agreement, I have no objection.
All right, then State's Exhibit number 23,
Number,
number 3 is admitted without objection.
Officer Ayala, when you arrived on scene, what were the scope of your duties?
I'm sorry.
What was the scope of your duties on scene?
When I arrived, I spoke with the handling officer and just see what he needed help with. And at that point, I told him I'd be able to read the defendant his Miranda rights.
Did you read the defendant his Miranda rights?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and did it comply with 38.2 of the Texas law?
Yes, ma'am.
Did the defendant indicate that he understood his rights?
Yes, ma'am.
And then, did you use any physical evidence on scene?
Yes, ma'am. Shortly after I read the Miranda rights, I got with the handling officer again, who handed me the narcotics and the paraphernalia.
And who was the defendant?
Officer Yale Johnson.
Did you bring those items of evidence at my direction today?
Yes, ma'am.
After you received the evidence from Officer Johnson, where did you go?
I went to the property room where I logged I'm sorry. Went to the property room, created the labels, and placed the narcotics and paraphernalia into separate manila envelopes and logged placed the tags as evidence.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 6 and State's Exhibit number 7. Do you recognize these items?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and just regarding, what is the SAPD case number that's associated with State's Exhibits number 5 and 6?
The case number is SAPD 25001284.
Okay, and both State's Exhibits number 5 and 6 contain serial barcodes on that, is that correct?
Correct.
And are you the person that affixed those barcodes on State's Exhibits 5 and 6?
Correct.
Okay. Now, looking in your supplemental report, you have, what did you list as E1 in your supplemental report?
It's gonna be the 0.7 grams of methamphetamine.
Okay, and is that corresponding with State's Exhibit number 5?
Yes.
Okay, and then what did you label as E2 in your report?
E2 is gonna be for the paraphernalia, the 2 glass pipes, one.
And does that correspond with State's Exhibit number 6?
Yes, ma'am.
regarding state's exhibit number 5, what is the barcode number that's associated with state's exhibit number 5?
It's gonna be barcode number 990001978844.
And what about with state's exhibit number 6?
It's gonna be barcode number 990001978845.
And then that corresponds with your report, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, now where is the first place that you observed state's exhibit number 5 and state's exhibit number 6?
When I was handed to it by the handling officer.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and just open state's exhibits number 5 and 6.
Yes, please.
Without pulling it out, look in there, does that appear to be the same item of evidence that you seized on and placed in the property room?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, state's exhibit number 6, do the same.
Same thing.
You recognize it to be the same thing with you observed on scene?
Correct.
Okay, and after you seized it on the scene, I guess you need to explain the property room status, secure location, what is it for?
Yes, ma'am. So in the property room, there's computers for us to log into to create the labels. Once the labels are created, we are then able to print them and to properly tag each envelope with recording evidence. And then from there, there's secured lockers. And there's also a secure spot for narcotics.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state offers state's exhibits 5 and 6 into evidence previously never been tendered to the.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, states exhibit 5 and 6 are admitted without objection. All right, defense, you may proceed.
Good morning, officer. Also, if my voice is low, if you understand, just let me know. I'll repeat my question louder.
Yes, sir.
Officer, you were the second officer that arrived, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were the one that translated for him?
Negative. I did not translate.
Did you read him his rights in Spanish?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you ask him some questions in Spanish prior to that?
Negative.
You didn't ask him any questions?
Just the Miranda rights in Spanish.
Okay, did my client tell you some things voluntarily in Spanish?
After I had read the rights.
Okay. Now, prior to reading someone their rights, you tell them what they're charged with, is that correct?
Correct.
And what did you tell him he was charged with?
I didn't say anything to him. I just spoke with the handling officer who just asked me to read the rights.
Yes, but understanding, this is prior to finding any drugs, is that correct?
Say again?
You read him his rights prior to finding any drugs, is that correct?
From what I understand is, they had already located the drugs. Because as soon as I read the Miranda rights, that's when I obtained their narcotics to place in the property room.
So they searched the vehicle prior to arresting him?
That would be between the handling officer and the translating officer.
Yes, but you were there, you're saying that when you got there, prior to reading them the rights, they already had the drugs and the paraphernalia, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that means they searched it before he was read his rights?
Yes, sir.
Prior to you arriving there, when you got there, besides you, was there someone there present that spoke Spanish?
At the time, I believe he showed up, yeah, he was there.
No, not after, but before you got there.
Before?
When you got there, was there someone already there that,
I don't recall if he was already.
did you do a police report?
Negative. I just did the place the property supplement.
Whenever you're reading someone their rights and become part of the investigation, isn't it your duty to write a supplemental police report?
I did the supplement for the property.
I'm not talking about property. This is just a list of the items you took. I'm asking you, since you're read his rights and you did take part in the arrest of this client, are you obligated to write a police report also?
Yes, sir.
And did you write one?
No,
So you didn't follow the route, the policies of the San Antonio Police Department at that point?
no,
No?
it's not.
Okay. How long have you been a police officer?
5 years.
5 years? So at the time of this stop, you're 5 or 4 or something?
4.
And so when you read him his rights, at that point, my client wasn't aware of what he was being arrested for.
Not sure if they had already advised them.
Well, you're the first one that spoke Spanish that arrived there, correct?
I don't speak Spanish. I just read off the little pamphlet that they gave us for the Spanish of the rights.
So then who's the one that told him in Spanish that he was being charged
I
with?
think that would be Officer Garza.
The next officer, third officer?
Right.
Okay. So up to this point, he's been written, he was in handcuffs and being detained, correct?
Correct.
He was under arrest, correct?
At this point, I believe he was already under arrest.
Prior to reading his rights.
Correct.
I mean, he couldn't just walk away.
No, he was not.
And so. Who's the one that got consent to search his car?
I believe that was Officer Garza.
And he's the one, the third officer that came in,
Yes.
and he's the one that talked to him in Spanish?
Correct.
And your role is just limited to just reading the rights in Spanish?
Say that again?
Your role was just to read his Miranda rights in Spanish?
Correct.
And you have that on the card, correct?
Correct.
And then what did you do next?
Immediately after I obtained the narcotics and paraphernalia from the alley officer, and then that's when I left the scene to go place it in the property room.
Okay, so you're done.
Correct.
Okay. That's the witness showing.
All right. Is this witness excused or subject for recall?
He's excused, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
State, call your next witness. Good morning. If you put that microphone on, the square microphone, it's for the court reporter to hear. If you could pin that somewhere. You're still under oath, and if you'll make sure you speak into that microphone so everyone can hear.
Okay.
All right, if you'll state your name for the record.
Joseph Garza.
All right, state, you may proceed.
Officer Garza, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed through the city of San Antonio, the police department.
How long have you, are you a certified peace officer?
I am
How long have you been a certified peace officer with San Antonio Police Department?
approximately 2.5 years total with the academy.
Can you explain the training that you underwent to become a police officer with SCP?
Yes. Extensive application process into physical training, penal code, traffic code, DWI investigations, crime scene investigations, numerous facets of the law and training in that.
All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Off the record for a moment. There is someone in the waiting room, Hannah Griffin.
That is the.
All right, if somebody will let her know that I haven't brought her in because the rule has been invoked. All right.
I'll let Rose know.
All right, thank you. You may continue.
What's your current title and assignment with San Antonio Police Department?
I am a police officer assigned to the West night shift.
Okay. Were you employed as a police officer with SCPD between January 2nd, 2025 and January 1st, 2025?
I was.
So do you have the same current title and assignment on that date?
On that day, I was assigned to downtown dog watch.
And dog watch, is that just an overnight shift?
Yes, overnight.
Okay. And what are your duties as a patrol officer?
My duties of patrol officer is, of course, generally patrol the area that I'm assigned to, answer calls for service. I can initiate traffic stops, various facets of law enforcement capabilities in that area.
So between January 2nd and the late hours of January 2nd, 2025, and the early morning hours of January 3rd, 2025. Were you assigned to a call under FCPD 25001280?
Yes, ma'am, I believe I was.
And how were you assigned to that?
I don't recall the specifics, but I do believe that I was dispatched or I self-assigned at dispatcher's request for a translation for a traffic stop conducted by another officer.
Okay. And so I guess within the department, are you known as a translating officer?
Within my shifts generally, just because I do speak Spanish,
Okay. Are you familiar with the language of Spanish?
I am.
How long have you spoke Spanish?
Since I was little, that's my parents' first language. So.
And so you're able to speak and understand Spanish, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so you arrive on scene, do you recall the other officers that were on scene when you arrived?
I believe I do, yes.
Who were they?
It was Yale Johnson, Ray Ariola. I believe Christopher Martinez showed up, but I'm iffy as to what he did. I think he was just providing traffic support.
Okay. I'm gonna show you what's been marked on State's Exhibit number 4. Can you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what is that?
It's the video of my body cam footage from that night.
Okay, have you reviewed it before?
Yes.
And did you place identifying marks on it to know that this is the same thing that you've earlier watched?
Yes, I did.
When you reviewed it, was it a fair and accurate depiction of the events as they occurred on the offense date?
Yes, ma'am.
And besides to comply with legal rules, to your knowledge, has it been altered in any way?
No, ma'am.
At this time, the state offers you to read to defense for inspection.
Subject to agreement, having it mute, I don't have no objection.
All right, then State's Exhibit number 4 is admitted. Granted.
So, and looking at State's Exhibit number 4, it appears that there's only one patrol vehicle on scene when you arrived, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I paused State's Exhibit number 4 after 39 seconds. Do you know who this person is right there?
Yes, that is Officer Yale Johnson.
And you know who that person is right there?
That is Mr. Saldana.
Do you see Mr. Saldana in court today?
I do, ma'am.
Can you just identify him by the color of clothing he's wearing?
Orange.
When you arrived, did the defendant identify himself to you?
He did.
Were you able to communicate with them?
I was.
At this point, have you, I guess, did you ask the defendant for authority to search anything on scene?
Yes, I asked him if we could search his vehicle.
And what was his response?
He stated, yes, we can.
After you received that verbal consent from him, did you communicate that to any other officer?
Yes, I did.
Was that Officer Johnson?
It was.
And is he the person that performed the search of the vehicle?
Yes.
And that was after obtaining the verbal consent from the defendant, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So currently on Exhibit number 4, we see you communicating with 2 officers. Who are those officers?
That is Ray Ariola and Yale Johnson.
At this point, the vehicle had not been searched, correct?
Correct.
You see Officer Johnson at the car, is that correct?
Yes.
And what is Officer Johnson doing, or is this for currently?
I believe he's beginning the search of the vehicle.
Do you know what Officer Johnson has in his hand currently on specific report?
Yes, it is a glass smoking pipe.
And what is that consistent with?
Based on my training experience and the level of residue, it'd be consistent with narcotics use.
Okay. Once, is that consistent with drug paraphernalia as well?
Yes, absolutely.
After that was located, did you conduct a search of the defendant's person?
I did.
Did you locate anything of significance on the defendant's person?
I did.
What is?
I located a glass smoking pipe of similar nature to the one that was found in the vehicle in his left front pocket.
I could show you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit number 6. Is this what you found on the defendant's person?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After you conducted a search of the defendant's person, did you do anything else on scene?
From what I recall, I just stayed on scene as just extra security. My vehicle was there preventing traffic from coming into us or anything like that.
When you conducted a search of the defendant's person, did you find anything that was consistent with like the use of tools?
I did. In his back left pocket, I found a couple screws, some drywall nails, and other various basic nails.
Here's a good one, okay? So, antes de que se le hagan preguntas, es mi deber.
What was said on this exhibit number 3?
Before you asked any questions,
Como oficial de policía informal de sus derechos y advertirle
What was said?
I'm sorry, can you play it again?
Here's a good one, okay? So, antes de que se le hagan preguntas, es mi deber como oficial de policía informal de sus derechos y
It's my duty as a police officer to inform you of your rights
de las consecuencias de no usar estos derechos.
and the consequences of waiving these rights.
Tienen el derecho de mantener su silencio.
You have the right to remain silent.
No tiene que hacer ninguna declaración oral o por escrito en
You do not have to make any statement oral or written
cualquier declaración que usted haga será usa en evidencia contra usted en una corte de ley.
Whatever you do say can be used against you in the court of law.
Y su uso, usted tiene el derecho de tener un abogado
You have the right to have an attorney
para aconsejarle a usted antes o durante cualquier interrogación por oficiales de policía, abogados representando a usted estado.
to consult you during any questioning by police officers or attorneys.
Usted puede tener su propio abogado presente o si usted no puede emplear un abogado, la corte nombrará a un abogado para usted sin costo ahora o cualquier otro tiempo.
You can hire your own attorney or an attorney can be appointed to you by the court without charge.
Si usted decide hablar con alguien, usted puede parar de hablar con ellos a cualquier tiempo que usted desea.
If you choose to talk with anybody, you can, and you can stop talking to them at any time that you want.
Los derechos anteriores son derechos continuos que pueden ser invocados por usted en cualquier etapa de los procedimientos.
These rights that I just read are continuous and you can invoke them at any time.
Usted tiene los derechos. Sí.
Do you understand your rights? Yes, he said C, yes.
¿Cuál droga es?
What drug is it?
¿Cuál droga? Ice.
Okay, and I guess before the, ICE, what does that mean in, your training experience?
In my training experience, ICE is referred to at street level as what is methamphetamine.
Okay. Before the defendant was recognized and at the time that Officer Johnson has located the narcotics in the vehicle, did you advise the defendant that he was under arrest and what for?
Before when?
Before the defendant was placed in the vehicle?
I can't recall. I believe I did. We had some discussion at length while I was searching him and explaining to him what was happening.
You have the witness room.
Defense?
Officer, you just stated that you did have some discussion, but I didn't see that on your body cam. Was your body cam off when you discussed that part with your partners?
My body cam was not off at any time.
Did you review the whole video?
Yes, I believe it's 25 minutes long, yes.
And in that the video, that's from the point that you got out of your car till you finished the investigation, correct?
Yes, I believe I deactivated my video.
So in that video, did you see yourself talking to the other officers regarding the charges? That question that was asked to you by the state
In the vid, I'm sorry,
in the video.
in the video, did
Did you see yourself talking to the other officers regarding the charges that you had?
I did see myself speaking with the other officers, yes.
Yeah, I know you're speaking to them, but as far as the content, did you tell them? Did they tell you what he was charged with at that point?
Officially charged with? No, because we need to know the weight of the substance.
Now, as far, you are the second person to read him as Miranda, right? So were you aware of that?
That I was the second person to read him as Miranda rights?
Are you aware of that?
I don't recall if I did or not.
In fact, Officer Ariola read him his Miranda rights prior to you showing up. Were you aware of that?
No.
So when you approached my client for the first time, did you tell him what he was being charged with at that point?
No, sir, I don't believe I did.
And this is prior to searching the vehicle, is that correct? Your initial contact with him?
What is prior to searching the vehicle?
They didn't search the vehicle till after you had a conversation with my client?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's when you asked my client if you could search the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you had some other conversation with my client, is that correct?
Yes.
And he told you that that was his boss's car?
I believe you did, yes.
Now in your training, You said you've been an officer 2.5 years, more or less?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In your training in the academy, whenever you read someone their Miranda rights, prior to reading them their rights, you tell them what they're charged with. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
If you don't tell them what they're charged with, you're not properly advising this person what he's charged with. You don't read him a Miranda rights unless you tell him what he's charged with, correct?
I do believe you can interview people, but before you do that, you read them their Miranda rights. Not necessarily if they're being charged, but perhaps witness to a crime or was in the vicinity of a crime that occurred, you want to interview this person.
Now, on a traffic, I may be asking this question again, but it'll be the last time I ask you this question. When you approached and spoke to the arresting officer, he didn't tell you why he was being arrested at that point?
When I first arrived,
Yes, and you spoke to the arresting officer. My client was already detained in handcuffs, read his Miranda rights. Did the officer tell you what he was being charged at that point?
when I arrived, Mr. Saldana was
No.
only detained.
I understand that. I'm asking you, when you arrived and you spoke to the arresting officer, my client was already under arrest in handcuffs. He had already been read his Miranda rights. Did the arresting officer tell you what his current charge was at that point?
Judge, I didn't, I'm gonna object just because I don't think that's a fair recitation of what occurred. Just, I did play the videos on Twitter, so state's exhibit number 3 is Officer Garza's vouch versus state's exhibit number.
All right, state you'll be able to redirect if you choose to do so. All right, defense, you may proceed.
Thank you. You were the third officer to arrive, correct?
I believe I was the second officer to arrive, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Why would the third officer read him his rights then?
I'm not sure, sir. We're helping each other out on the call. One officer may be doing another activity while one may be assisting with reading Miranda rights.
Well, if you read him his rights already, why would this other officer have to read him his rights?
So I believe there might be some confusion. I did not read him his rights. Not that I recall, not that I saw in my video.
So you never read him his rights in Spanish?
I didn't.
You did?
I did not.
So who was that on the video?
That was Officer Ray Ariola. He was here previous to me.
Okay, he's the one that read him his rights?
Yes, sir.
So you're the second officer to come in, and at that time, my client was detained under arrest, correct?
He was detained when I arrived.
Well, he wasn't free to leave, right?
That's, yes.
And what did the arresting officer tell you why he was detaining him? What was the charge?
So he was detained.
Why?
So technically on any traffic stop, right? I activate my emergency lights. You are at that time detained. And then subsequent to that, Pennsylvania versus Mims, I asked, our Officer Yale Johnson asked him to exit the vehicle. And place him in handcuffs for his safety and ours. As to what Officer Johnson observed that would lead him to do that, which is within our capability, I can't speak to, but I just know that when I arrived, Mr. Saldana was detained lawfully and in handcuffs, but not yet charged with any crime. Just a traffic violation.
You're kind of confusing when you, based on what you're telling me, you and the arresting officer arrived at the same time?
No,
The arresting officer made the initial stop, then he called for someone to come and speak Spanish, correct?
yes, sir.
And then that's when you came in, correct?
Yes, sir.
So when you arrived there, my client was already detained, handcuffed in the back of the vehicle, in the front of the police vehicle. Is that correct?
In the back of or in front?
In front, back of his vehicle, but in front of the police officer's vehicle.
Yes, he was in handcuffs, detained in front of the police vehicle.
And the officer didn't tell you why he was detaining him at that point?
No,
And then you proceed to ask him questions without reading him his rights, is that correct?
questions pertaining to a crime?
You asked him questions, any questions,
Oh, yes, sir.
and you asked for permission to search his vehicle, correct?
Yes, sir.
Um, This is, this was a traffic violation, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, it was an equipment stop, correct?
As far as I know, I can't speak to,
You just know the traffic stop was there. You arrived and you had him pulled over, correct?
yes, sir.
Fair enough. Went on a traffic stop. What do you base y'all's decision on a simple traffic stop to take the person out of the vehicle, hold on the handcuffs, and then ask to check their vehicle?
So there could be a number of factors that lead to somebody being detained for safety, detained and placed in handcuffs. That could be furtive movement, prior knowledge, perhaps even the recognition of a gang tattoo on said person, or that prior firearms convictions and stuff like that.
Would it be based on race?
Can it be based on race? No.
I'm just asking. I've been stopped before. I've never been searched like that. So your whole conversation with him was done prior to reading the Miranda rights, correct?
Correct.
And you weren't the one that did the inventory on the vehicle, correct?
I was not.
On a basic traffic stop, why do you have to search someone's vehicle?
And I'm gonna object to the lack of personal knowledge in this case because he's already testified that he arrived after the stop and was not surprised and absent prior to the stop and he's not searching the officer in this case.
He's the one that asked in Spanish if he could search your vehicle.
All right, so what is your question?
My question is, why do you have to do an inspection of a vehicle in a Class C traffic stop?
All right, are you asking for this specific
I'm
case?
asking you based on your experience as an officer
Are you asking him about this specific case?
in general.
All right, you may ask the question if you know the answer.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure, based on your training and your experience, why do you officers on a Class C misdemeanor selectively pick people to do a vehicle search?
There could be a number of factors that play into that. Like I said, sort of movement, driving behavior, body language. Using, is this person furtive, nervous? Are they, there's a number of factors that can go into that. It's a traffic stop. Should the officer determine that he'd like to investigate, should there be crime afoot? I think that's something within our purview.
Okay. Did my client tell you what kind of work he was doing?
I can't remember that he did.
Did his shirt have a construction name on it, if you recall?
If it did, I didn't read it. I'm sorry, sir.
And in the back of his pants, you found what, nails and
Nails and screws.
stuff that they use for construction sites?
Yes, sir.
No further questions, sir.
All right, you may proceed. Any redirect?
So if I'm understanding correctly, you were in the first incident in the report, which is your body movement. So when you arrived on scene and stated that number 4, it appeared in the video, you identified that Officer Johnson was the only one that was subject to decision at that time, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, there were no other SPD patrol vehicles on the scene at that time, correct?
Correct.
So at this point, you testified on cross-examination that it's your understanding the defendant had been detained by Officer Johnson, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and Officer Johnson put out on the radio for a Spanish-speaking officer to make the scene to translate, correct?
Correct.
So it's fair to say that Officer Johnson at that point had been unable to identify the defendant, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you testified on cross that a reason to detain somebody during a traffic stop is if they had previously been making furtive movements and the officer has reason to believe that his safety is in jeopardy, is that correct?
Correct.
And so then you don't agree the defendant has Miranda rights, correct? That was Officer Adiola, correct?
Correct.
All right, and so when you arrive on scene, at this point, you attempt to identify the defendant, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then in your discussions with him, you obtain the verbal consent for the search of the motor vehicle, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
Okay. And so then at that point, you communicate that verbal consent to Officer Johnson, which we saw in CC number 4, correct?
Correct.
And then Officer Johnson goes over to the motor vehicle and conducts a search, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then at that time, drug paraphernalia is found, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that is, you're able to observe that on scene and in CC in the report, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and then, at that point, that's when we conduct the search of, the defendant's person, right?
Correct.
We talked about this first.
Any further questions?
Just one or two questions. Officer, you saw the back of the vehicle that my client was driving?
Yes, sir.
It was heavily tinted.
It was dark.
And it's even darker at night, right?
It can be.
No further questions.
No further questions and excuse by the state.
All right, is this witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down if you'll leave your microphone behind. All right, state, you may call your next witness.
The state.
Hannah Griffin, are you there? If you could unmute, please, and show your video.
Yes, I'm here.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you on our end. Just give us one moment.
Okay.
All right, could you speak first to make sure that we can hear you on our end?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
The interpreter, are you able to hear her? All right. All right, can you say something now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that is great.
Okay.
All right, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you can lower your hand if you'll state your name for the record.
My name is Hannah Griffin.
All right, state you may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. How are you presently employed?
I am a forensic scientist with the Bexar County Crime Lab in the drug identification section.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
I have been employed there for 6.5 years.
Okay. And what are your duties as a forensic scientist in the drug ID section of the Bexar County Crime Lab?
As a forensic scientist in drug ID, I perform testing on evidence submitted by law enforcement agencies to determine whether an unknown substance is a controlled substance. I analyze my test results and prepare reports to those findings, and I give those reports to law enforcement agencies, and I testify in court as an expert witness.
Okay. Can you describe your educational background, please?
Yes, I have a bachelor's of science in forensic science, or forensic chemistry, I'm sorry, from the University of Mississippi.
Okay. And have you underwent any training to qualify you as a forensic scientist with the crime lab?
Yes, I completed on-the-job training with the crime lab upon my employment. That included required readings, written examinations, practical examinations where I showed proficiency in specific tasks required as per our protocol. I also completed observation of casework from a released and trained analyst. And then I also performed supervised casework underneath a trained analyst where I did actual evidence analysis and things like that. And I also participated in a mock trial to prepare for testimony as an expert witness.
Okay. And have you previously testified as an expert in court before?
Yes,
All right. Does the Bexar County Crime Lab have credentials or certification, or is it accredited? Excuse me.
yes. The Bexar County Crime Lab is an accredited laboratory with ANAB, which is our national accreditation board.
Okay. And in the Bexar County Crime Lab, do you have the ability to take an unknown substance and analyze it and identify it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And did you do that in the case that we're here for today?
I did.
Briefly, can you just explain how a specimen is received in the lab for testing?
Yes. The law enforcement agency will submit the evidence to our evidence receiving section, where it is entered into our laboratory information management system, LIMS for short, and it's given a unique identifying number known as the Criminal Investigation Laboratory Number, CIL number. There it is stored in a secure evidence vault until it is time for an analyst to pick it up and perform testing on it. At that time, an analyst will come down and sign it out. So then it's in their custody and they will take it to whatever section they're in and perform analysis on it as needed. And during that time, the evidence stays secure in the individual section's evidence vault.
Okay.
And just one moment to interrupt. This witness is appearing by Zoom, and both parties had no objection to this witness appearing by Zoom. Is that correct, State?
That's correct.
Defense, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Saldana, you had no objection to this witness appearing by Zoom?
For 5. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Is this a substance or was state exhibit number 5 received into your lab for testing and analysis?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And how are you able to recognize state exhibit number 5?
I'm able to recognize this evidence based off of the CIL number, like I mentioned before, as well as my initials and the date it was received, and the Bexar County Crime Lab evidence tape that is on the top.
And so your additional identifying marks on state exhibit number 5, is that correct?
Those marks were made by the evidence receiving section, the ones you're pointing out right now.
Okay, and then this is your additional signature here, is that correct?
Correct. That is my initials and the date of when the evidence was sealed and finished analysis.
Okay. When these substances are received in the lab, are they assigned well, you've already explained the CIL number. What was the CIL number in this case?
The CIL number in this case was 25-00184.
Okay. And did that correspond with the agency case number of 25-00-1284?
Yes.
Okay. And on what day did you personally take custody of the substance for analysis?
May I refer to my notes? I have a copy of the discovery packet with chain of custody on it right here.
Yes.
Okay. The date that I personally took custody of this case was February 6th, 2025.
Okay, and prior to that, isn't it correct that it was received from the San Antonio Police Department on January 8th of 2025 by the crime lab?
That is correct. That's what my notes are saying.
Okay. And then what dates were your analysis conducted?
Specifically, the analysis was conducted. I started analysis on it on February 12th, 2025, and released the case, completed everything on February 21st, 2025.
Okay, can you please explain to the court the type of analysis that you conducted on State's Exhibit number 5?
Yes. On State's Exhibit 5, I performed presumptive testing as well as confirmatory testing.
What does that look like?
So presumptive testing gives a general idea of what a substance could be, to where it leads us in the direction of how to proceed confirming the identity of the substance. Whereas when I do confirmatory testing, I am positively identifying it or determining the identity of an unknown substance. Would you like further explanation?
Yes, please.
So some of the presumptive tests that I performed were a color test, as well as something called thin layer chromatography. And the confirmatory testing that I performed on this item was gas chromatography mass spectrometry.
Okay. And are those methods accepted by the scientific community?
Yes, they are.
And are they known to be reliable?
Yes.
Okay. After you conducted your analysis, did you make a report of your findings?
I did.
Okay. Can you see the document that I'm holding up to you?
Yes.
All right. Does this document contain your signature?
It does.
And it contains the correct identifiers, the CIL number and the case number?
Correct.
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of the results that you generated at the time that you conducted your analysis?
Yes.
And are you custodian of records for the Bexar County Crime Lab?
I am.
Okay, and is this exhibit number 7 maintained in the course of business at the crime lab?
Yes.
At this time, tendering the defense for inspection.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, and what exhibit number is that, please? All right, State's Exhibit number 7 is admitted without objection.
Okay. Ms. Griffin, what was the result of your analysis of the substance in this case?
This item tested positive for methamphetamine.
Okay. Is that a controlled substance in the state of Texas?
It is.
Okay. Do you know what PG group that is?
I believe it is a penalty group 1.
Okay. Did you weigh the controlled substance?
I did.
Okay. What was the weight of of State's exhibit number, or what was the weight of the substance?
The weight of the item that I tested was 0.253 grams with an uncertainty of 0.004 grams.
Okay. And then apart from what you used for the analysis, did you alter or change the contents of the bag or the substance in any way?
No, I did not.
Okay. Was there anything that prohibited you from conducting the analysis or any issues with the analysis?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, we pass the witness.
All right, defense, you may proceed.
Thank you. You stated that you received the items on February 6th, correct?
That's correct. That's when they were in my custody officially.
And my client was arrested on January 3rd. Do you know where these items were being stored between this time period of January 3rd and February 6th?
Like I said before, I can only speak to the chain of custody that started when it came into the lab, and it entered into our laboratory on January 8th. So I can say that the evidence was in our secure evidence vault starting January 8th until I received it, where it was then continued to be kept in a secure vault until analysis was completed and returned to the agency. I can't testify to where it was before January 8th.
Now, depending where these items, actually, let me rephrase this. When you received items, where did you store these items?
When I received the items, the evidence, I stored it in the drug identification section secure vault for evidence. That is badge access only for our section.
And is this area like refrigerator or just like a safe?
It is a secure locked room. It is not refrigerated.
And how high does the temperature get in that room?
The laboratory is kept temperature controlled, so I would say room temperature 70 degrees or so Fahrenheit.
Where these items are temporarily stored until you run your test, correct?
That's correct.
When you say temper control, how do you control the temperature?
That's a question for facilities management. I have no clue how the temperature is controlled.
Can the temperature affect these items?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Now, when you weigh these items, did you take them out of the plastic bag?
I did. When I weighed it, I measured it as a net weight. So I took it out of all packaging and it was just the weight of the substance inside all the packaging.
I know you tell me so many grams, but how does that look like? Like half a sweet and low pack or something like that?
So 0.253 grams. To compare, a sweet and low pack's about 1 gram. So a quarter of a sweet and low pack is about how much this substance was.
Thank you.
No further questions, Judge.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Which sides?
Sorry.
Actually, I don't know further questions.
Right. Any other questions?
No,
today?
Judge.
All right, is this witness excused?
Yes, Judge, by the state.
Move for mistrial.
Oh, thank you. You may be excused.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My bad.
All right, state, call your next witness.
The state rests, Your Honor.
All right, defense. So first things, you had filed a motion to suppress, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, do y'all have the motion to suppress for me, Vikky?
I got a copy here, Judge. We got
Oh, if you'll bring the copy forward. And state, have you reviewed
Yeah, that's right.
the motion to suppress?
Yes,
Your
Judge.
Honor,
Oh, just one moment, let me review it.
no, I was gonna arrest too. Can we just do both at the same time?
Well, I think, of course, if we were before a jury doing a motion to suppress, this would sort of be pretrial, so it may be appropriate to handle the motion to suppress. And then,
You read that, may I go to restroom?
yes. See,
Yes, Judge.
all right, we are back on the record. And defense, the court is in receipt of your motion to suppress and state you received the motion.
Yes.
All right, defense, the court will hear your argument with regards to the motion to suppress.
Yeah, I know you told me I can sit back, feel more comfortable if I stand for the court.
That's fine.
Your Honor, I ask that the court take judicial notice that this was a warrantless arrest.
Okay, let's start there. State, do you
I
agree that this
stipulate
is
to
the-
that, yes.
Yes, all right. So that's been stipulated too, and the court will note for the record that this arrest was done without a warrant.
Your Honor, in regard to my motion to suppress, I'm asking to suppress the drug item and the drug paraphernalia that's found in my car because it was a wrongfully searched vehicle, unconsubstantiated. Wrongful search because my client wasn't properly memorized before they asked for consent to search the vehicle. Initially, when he was stopped, the officer that stopped him didn't speak Spanish, so he did the proper thing, got on the radio, asked for a Spanish-speaking officer to show up. He did take my client out of the vehicle for his safety concerns, and I realized that's a judgment call because the most dangerous part of a traffic stop is when the officer gets out of the car and walks to the driver's door. And it's a judge's call, and I respect that. However, Your Honor, he did the proper thing. He asked for a Spanish speaker. We heard testimony of two officers. They were out of order. I thought the second officer was the second officer that made the stop, but it's actually the third officer that came in second, who spoke Spanish, and asked him questions. But for some reason, if this person spoke Spanish at that point, he should have read him his Miranda rights. Instead, he did not. Instead, he did it. He asked him questions. He asked to search the car before he was even read his rights. I understand at this point, Your Honor, my client is detained. He is handcuffed. He is not from the United States. He's under stress, so he doesn't have he hasn't been read his rights. So he at this point, before searching the car, they should have read him his rights. So he could at that point exercise his right to have an attorney, exercise his right to remain silent. But at this point, they decided they asked questions before reading his rights. And this is a Class C misdemeanor, an equipment failure. There was nothing there to show that the officer was in danger, nothing there to show that he was using drugs. He didn't smell any drugs. My client didn't smell like alcohol. My client didn't seem like he was under the influence of anything. But at this point, the second officer, since he spoke Spanish, should have read him his rights before he spoke to him and asked him these questions. And then once they did find these pipe and what have you, the third officer that read him his rights and then followed proper procedure. Prior to reading his right, you tell him what he's charged with. He never did that. All he did was tell him read him his rights, and that was it. We didn't get any testimony from the two other officers saying that what he was being charged with prior to this him read his Miranda rights. But the most important thing, Your Honor, is that the second officer should have initially, once my client was detained in handcuffs and wasn't able to go anywhere, should have read him his Miranda rights before he proceeded to ask him questions, before he proceeded to ask to search the vehicle. And for that reason, Your Honor, we're asking to suppress the evidence and any testimony of the three officers. Thank you.
All right, State, you may proceed.
Judge, so we're asking that you deny the suppression. If we look at the evidence linearly, the officer did have a reason to conduct a traffic stop. Officer Johnston testified that the car had expired registration, and that was the reason that he pulled the car over. Now, looking in the interaction between the officer and the defendant, Officer Johnston did testify that the defendant did not identify himself to Officer Johnston, and that may partly be because of the language barrier, but he was pulled out due to furtive movements that Officer Johnston did observe the defendant making prior to the stop, and Officer Johnston did testify that it was for officer safety. And so at the time that Officer Garza arrives, which is the second officer, the defendant is not under arrest at this point. There's no evidence that he was committing any offenses other than Class C violations. And so at this time, I think the evidence shows that the police are trying to identify him and either cite him and send him on his way, or conduct additional investigation. But Officer Garza did obtain that verbal consent from the defendant that was then communicated to Officer Johnston, which is supported by the exhibits that have been entered into evidence. And so at that time, Officer Johnston goes to the vehicle after he's informed that Officer Garza did obtain verbal consent from the defendant, and that is when he conducts a search of the vehicle and observes the drug paraphernalia and the illegal substances in the car. We see that those substances are pulled out and placed on the hood in front of the defendant, and that is when he's placed under arrest and then later on read his Miranda rights. And so I would ask that the court deny the motion.
All right, so here's the court's question. If the defendant had not given consent, defense, are you saying that the search would not be admissible?
I would state if it's not admissible because they didn't read them as Miranda rights.
No, I mean, if there was no reading of rights. If there was no consent ever given to search the vehicle, are you saying that they did not have the authority to search the vehicle without his consent?
Yes, because he was in control of the vehicle.
All right, so with regard to the first point in your motion, the court is finding that the stop was a legal stop. So now we move to the next issue of whether or not there was a right to search the vehicle, but because based upon the evidence that the court has received, you have drugs that were found inside the vehicle. Is there anyone here from either side who is stating that, according to testimony, that the drugs were not found in the vehicle? So are both parties agreed that drugs were found in the vehicle?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so, and do both parties agree that the drugs were found because the officer searched the vehicle?
Yes,
All right, so as previously stated, I'm finding that the stop was a legal stop. So the next question becomes whether or not the search of the vehicle was appropriate. So let's assume that there was no consent ever given. Are you still arguing that the police did not have the right to search the vehicle without a consent?
yes, Your Honor, because he had at that point, they hadn't charged him of any crime.
All right, and state, if the consent were not given to search the vehicle, would you say that they still had the authority to search the vehicle? If the consent were not given?
If the consent were not given, I think the evidence that has been, or what testimony has brought out is that, yeah, I'm gonna say no, they wouldn't have had.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then the next question becomes the consent. So let's focus on his giving of consent to search the vehicle. And I think both parties will stipulate that he gave consent to have the vehicle searched.
Yes.
Yes,
All right, so then it becomes whether or not the consent was given voluntarily. Is that your argument?
yes, Your Honor.
All right, so then let's address the voluntariness of the consent. All right, defense, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, he was handcuffed. He was checked. He was checked for anything, any weapons in his body. At this point, he was being detained. He was not free to go. And so at this point, when the person's arrested, they get nervous and afraid and under duress, and they believe it. And him not being from the United States, not really knowing his rights. At this point, I mean, he's under duress, he's handcuffed before, and so I don't think it was a voluntary consent because he wasn't properly advised on whether he could or could not. The only thing he knew was that he had handcuffs on, he was under arrest.
All right, so the question becomes then, are you saying that the consent to search was given while he was in handcuffs, but before he was Mirandized?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so do both parties stipulate that the consent to search was given before he was Mirandized?
The consent was obtained prior to Miranda, yes.
All right, then the next question becomes whether or not was he in handcuffs before he gave consent to search?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, he was.
All right, so let's focus on that then with the voluntariness of the consent to search while he was handcuffed. All right, so your argument, now that both parties have agreed that he wasn't Mirandized, he was placed in handcuffs, and then he was asked if he would give consent to search the vehicle, and both parties stipulate that he said yes, they could search the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
Your Honor.
All right, so then now we're looking at whether or not, because he was in handcuffs, was the consent voluntary? So we could narrow it down and focus on that.
I don't believe it was voluntary, Your Honor. This is a class C violation, which a person gets a ticket and then is put on his way. In this case, it was put out, immediately removed from his vehicle because the officer thought he feared for his safety, and then he was handcuffed. At this point, when you're handcuffed, he's, especially someone who's limited in the law, is gonna be under duress and believe that he's under arrest, and the best thing to do is cooperate with the officers. Had he been advised that he could have said no, he might have said no, but at this point, he's nervous and he's just trying to be cooperative with the police because he in his mind, he believes he's under arrest.
All right, and state.
Judge, just surrounding the voluntariness, I think we need to look at all of the relevant circumstances that are surrounding that. So regarding the argument that the defendant was not informed that he had a right to refuse, that's not required by law. And so I think here there's no evidence that, he was repeatedly asked. There's no evidence that the defendant ever denied the consent after being asked one time. Additionally, I think we need to look at the proximity of the consent to the detention. The whole encounter was less than 25 minutes. And I guess,
Your Honor.
Oh, just one second.
hold on. Yeah, sorry.
All right, let's do this for both sides. Because now that I think all parties know what your issue is, and it's strictly whether or not he voluntarily consented to the search. It's been established by both parties that he was in handcuffs at the time he consented, that he had not been Mirandized before he consented. So let's take a recess. I will give both parties to formulate their arguments. And counsel, you stated that you have no witnesses. Is that correct? All right. So I'll have everybody come back here at 1:30. And that way, are you able to do that, counsel?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So that way everybody can formulate more arguments if they have more arguments for the court. And then at that time, the court will make its ruling.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So both the state and defense have brought to the court just now cases, and there are 4 cases. And the court is familiar with the cases, but I always like to review them again to make sure I'm not missing anything. And defense, you said you wanted to make your final arguments now instead of the following Monday.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I will hear your argument.
I'm gonna sit down if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
The seatbelt.
All right.
Your Honor, regarding this, the issue was that Miranda warning must be administered prior to custodial interrogation. And this issue comes to the point where after the first officer removed my client immediately from the vehicle, he did put him in handcuffs, took him to the back front of his police car, and called a second officer that speaks Spanish because there's a language barrier between him and this person. And when he did take him to the back, he did take body frisk for any weapons, what have you, didn't find any weapons. Now, when the second officer came, there's now 3 officers. There's one directing traffic, the arresting officer, and the officer that spoke Spanish. For some reason, that my client was detained at this time. He was not free to go. The officer have testified to that. He was in handcuffs. The second officer, who speaks Spanish, for some reason did not read him his Miranda rights and instead asked him questions. And at which time, take in mind, my client is a Spanish speaker, is not familiar with his rights. He asked him if he can search the vehicle. I think he, in this case, you should have asked him, you should have read him his rights prior to doing this interrogation. My client said yes, but I believe he was under duress. It's taking the factors that my client was in handcuffs, he was in front of a police car with the lights on. He had 2 officers. My client's not familiar with the laws here. the Miranda Court has refined the meaning of custodial to the ultimate inquiry is simply whether there is a formal arrest or a restraint on freedom of movement of the degree associated with a formal arrest. I submit, yes, Your Honor, he's in handcuffs, he can't leave. He's in the front of the police car, he have lights on, he's detained, for all practical purposes. I would believe that he is, he's under formal arrest. For that reason, they should have read him his Miranda rights. And there's 4 factors the Supreme Court likes to take in consideration. Whether the defendant was the focus of the investigation, yes, he was the only person in the vehicle. He was stopped for equipment failure on his vehicle. Neither officers witnessed my client commit any kind of crime. Was he the subject intent of the police? I submit to you, yes, he was the only person that was under arrest that had handcuffs. Whether probable cause to arrest exists at that time, I submit to you, no. At this time, they had not searched the car, they had not found any drugs. The only thing in question right now is that he may not have a license. And 4th, the subject the belief of the defendant. Well, if you put yourself in a position of this person, here you got a guy at 12 midnight who stopped for no traffic violation, but because of an expired sticker, Class C misdemeanor. Most cases, you get a citation, you move on your way. This case, the officer immediately removed him from the vehicle, for his reasons being, handcuffed him, put him in in front of the police car, which is the back end of his car, and held him there for more than a reasonable period of time. Second officer showed up, who spoke Spanish. He was not told why the guy was being detained. He just asked him questions, but before he asked him questions, he should have read him his Miranda rights. And I believe the case that I provided the court is on point as regarding the custodial interrogation of a person. And I believe that in this case, we ask that the court grant our motion to suppress.
All right, State.
Judge, regarding the detention, the facts in this case support that it was a legal detention. Officer Johnston did testify that he did ask the defendant for his license and the defendant was unable to provide that. So that in conjunction with the fact that Officer Johnston observed furtive movements by the defendant inside of the car led him to believe that he needed to pull him out for officer safety and to get him identified. From there, he is placed in front of the officer's patrol vehicle, and then Spanish-speaking Officer Garza, arrives on scene to translate. I think that it's important at that time. It is true, it is only a Class C investigation that is going on. And then I think also the failure to identify, and I'm not referring to that as an additional offense, but just the fact, go further into the officer safety, because at this point, Officer Johnson doesn't know whether this defendant has warrants or whatever. And so it's imperative that he does get him identified, and he's conducting an investigation into the traffic violations to decide what needs to happen. Does he, cite this individual and send him on his way, or is there something more going on? And so that is what is occurring. I think as to the voluntariness of the consent that was obtained to search, courts and determining whether it is voluntary consent look into a multitude of factors. One, whether the police displayed weapons or used physical force or other intimidating tactics. There's no evidence of that here. In all the state's exhibits, firearms are never displayed. There's no physical force. The defendant did not have any injuries or anything of that nature. There's no evidence of police misconduct, which is another factor. The police did not assert a right to search. It was asked and answered in one swoop. And the degree to which the detainee cooperated, he was cooperating or cooperative, and that was listed. In addition, the length of the detention, as stated earlier, it was less than 25 minutes. And so all of those factors go to show that it was voluntary. And then if the factors that I just listed are in the case that was provided to the court state the 2017 $590 in US currency. And then in that case, the court found that, and the facts are similar to our case because, in that case, the defendant, or Officer Moore was the only officer present when a consent was requested and his weapon was not drawn. And those facts are the same as in our case. Officer Garza was the only officer that was in the vicinity when the consent was elicited. There was not like an overwhelming showing of law enforcement in this case. And that's displayed in the state's exhibits. There's no evidence of any verbal or physical abuse. Further, they were on a public roadway, so it's not like they were in an isolated area where the defendant felt that he had to cooperate. And then if we move to the other case, Johnson v. State, that was provided to the court. In that case, it's similar facts as the defendant was not provided Miranda warnings. And the court found that that was a voluntary consent. And so I have not been able to find any authority that states that the Miranda warnings have to be read prior to obtaining voluntary consent. And I would submit to the court that the questioning that was occurring during the detention was not custodial interrogation because there was no reason for the defendant to be arrested at the time.
All right.
Quick response.
Yes, it's your motion. You can have final argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. The case law that the state has provided doesn't address the issue before the court. The issue before the court is whether the second officer of interview of my client was in custodial interrogation. If it was, it required that my client be read his Miranda rights prior to any interview with my client. I submit to you, based on the factors I provided and the case law I provided, that this was a custodial interview, and that we ask that you grant our motion to suppress.
All right, so defense, just so I can be clear, you're saying that the asking if your client would consent to the search of the vehicle was custodial.
Yes.
All right, any response?
Judge, I will just reiterate, it was not custodial interrogation at that point. It was a detention and they were asking, investigative questions. There was no reason to be under arrest at that point, and he was not. Like I said earlier, the officer was trying to get him identified, and at that point he still could have cited him and sent him on his way. And so I don't.
But was the consent to search seeking to have him identified?
Well, I don't believe that he was. Well, and I guess I should clarify because it was two different officers that was acting. So I think, well, I'm to the court putting it in the totality of the circumstances, but when Officer Johnson is sitting in the car attempting to get him identified, when Officer Garza is with the defendant, asking him for his name, providing to Johnson, Johnson's running and trying to get him pulled up in the computer. And then Officer Garza does ask for the consent at that time.
All right. And then counsel, part of your argument, you were stating that your client did not know the legal system, but the court doesn't have any evidence before me, whether he knew the legal system or not.
I understand, Your Honor, but if we follow the case law regarding custodial interrogation, there's 4 points that the court used to evaluate the case. It would show that it was a custodial interrogation, and at which point, whether he knew the law or not, it's not relevant. The state, just being a custodial interrogation, should have read him with Miranda rights prior to beginning his questioning my client.
All right.
And Judge, if I could just
Yes.
ask, I'm sorry, but just regarding the custodial interrogation, it's not like he's asking him questions as to illegal activity. And I think that's an important fact here. It's like he's not asking him, like, hey, we saw you doing this. Are you in possession? It was just, can you have consent to search the vehicle? It was not related to any crime at that time.
All right. All right, everyone. So what I'll do is I'll read your case law. As you all know, I would give you all my ruling on Monday, but I'm not going to be here on Monday. I'll be at a CLE. So the earliest I can have you all back is the 23rd. If you all can't be here on that date, just let Ms. Ferguson know. Maybe it's a date you all can confer on.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you so much. Is there anything else?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Those-
So the court is calling 2025 CR 003338 State versus Carlos Vasquez Saldana. Can I have parties announce?
Megan Galloway for the state.
Roberto Vargas for the defendant, ready to proceed, Your Honor.
And are you Carlos Vasquez Saldana? You need to respond yes or no.
Yes.
All right. And we have an interpreter here. If you could raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly swear and affirm you will faithfully translate from English into Spanish and Spanish into English, so help you God?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, you can lower your hand if you'll state your name for the record.
My name is Catalina Delgado, spelled Delgado, license number 2222.
All right. So we were here for a bench trial and there was a motion to suppress presented during the bench trial as well. So the court recalls the evidence as follows. The defendant was pulled over for an expired registration. And after he was pulled over for an expired registration, he was asked to step out of the vehicle. He was placed in handcuffs. And once he was placed in handcuffs, then there was a question of his consenting to search. So the officer asked to search and he gave consent when he was in handcuffs. Is that correct?
No, Your Honor, it's a language barrier, so they call the second officer.
No, I mean, I know that's in between where they call another officer to come out to interpret, but my memory is that you have the expired registration. Then he's placed into handcuffs. And then he's asked to give consent to search.
That's correct.
Well, I just want to be more specific on the record, Your
Okay,
Honor.
go for it.
The arresting officer realized he didn't speak Spanish, so he called the second officer. At which time they waited for the second officer to show up, and the second officer showed up. That's when he started to interview the guy. And he had asked him if he can search the vehicle in Spanish.
All right, so my understanding is from reviewing the video and listening to the testimony, it wasn't as though that there was an hour time elapsed between the officer requesting someone who spoke Spanish or an officer who spoke Spanish to come on the scene. My understanding is there wasn't a unreasonable amount of time between the English speaking officer and the Spanish speaking officer arriving. Is that correct?
I don't know how much time went by.
It was the amount of time that elapsed between when the first officer pulled the defendant out of the vehicle to when the second Spanish speaking officer arrived was less than 5 minutes. And I think that would be supported by the evidence that was admitted in the trial.
All right, so what the court can say in reviewing the video, the consent to, the arrival of the Spanish speaking officer, the court is going to find that there wasn't an unreasonable amount of time that the Spanish speaking officer arrived after police had first contact with your client. So does anyone want to again address the issue of his giving consent to search while he was in handcuffs? Because I believe that's the crux of your argument, that the consent to search wasn't voluntary.
Yes, Your Honor, just when the second officer showed up, my client was already in handcuffs in the back of in front of the police car. At this time, he's in handcuffs and no one has told him what he's being charged with or why he's being detained. When the second officer showed up, he speaks Spanish. He should initially told him what he was charged with before he started the conversation. He should have also read him his rights in Spanish. The second officer speaks Spanish. There's no reason why they needed to call the third officer so he can read him his rights in Spanish. But that's the heart of my argument is that the second officer speaks Spanish. He just asked him questions, didn't tell the guy what he was being charged with. He just started asking him questions. And my client was nervous. It's reasonable for a person late at night being taken out of your vehicle in handcuffs. And no one's telling you what you're being charged of, and they're bringing a second officer who speaks Spanish. He could at least have the courtesy to tell me, hey, you're being charged of this, and then ask him questions, or you're being charged of this. I'm gonna read you your rights, and then I'm gonna ask you questions. After I read you your Miranda rights, do you consent to a search?
But do
guy's
you
nervous.
need to give someone their Miranda rights in order to obtain a consent to search?
Well, in this case, he would, because the guy's in handcuffs. I mean, if the guy's just standing out there like anybody, you don't need to read him his rights. But this guy was under the impression that he's under arrest because he's handcuffed and no one tells him what he's charged with. So if you're under the impression you're under arrest because you're in handcuffs, I think you should read him his rights before you start speaking to the person.
But didn't they say that, or the video shows that he's being detained and the officer testified that he's being detained? And the reason why he has him in handcuffs, the officer testified that when he pulled him over, that he appeared to be making furtive movements in the vehicle.
He said he saw my client, see my client's as tall as me, while driving, reaching into the glove compartment and playing with it with tinted windows. I'm as tall as this guy, and I tried to check my glove compartment the other day. It's impossible without weaving. The windows were tinted, so it's a question of credibility of the officer. But either way, no one told him why he was in handcuffs. Officer told us in English why he did it, but he never told my client why he put him in handcuffs. And that's the most important thing. If you're gonna put someone in handcuffs, you have to tell them why you're doing it.
All right. And then my understanding from the testimony reviewing the video, he was only asked one time whether or not he would consent to the search of the vehicle.
Yes.
Okay. All right, State.
Judge, my response is just that at the time that the defendant was placed in handcuffs by Officer Johnston, it was a legal detention. At that point, the defendant had failed to identify himself. And so that, in addition to the furtive movements that were observed and testified to by the officer, gave him the ability to place the defendant in handcuffs for officer safety, which was also testified to. At the time that the second officer, Officer Garza, was communicating with the defendant, although he was in handcuffs, no arrestable offense had occurred at that time. And I think that's important in the court's consideration of whether a custodial interrogation was taking place. In the case that I submitted to the court the last time that we were here, it states that no Miranda is required to obtain consent to search. And regarding the handcuffs or being in custody, that's just one factor for the court to consider, in addition to the other factors in the cases that I provided, such as the law enforcement presence, the place of the stop, and all the other factors that that are obtained in the case law. And so we would ask you to deny their motion.
All right, defense, I'll give you final argument if you have any more information to add.
Other than the fact that, Your Honor, he was put in cuffs because the officer believed he was in danger because he allegedly thought he saw my client reach into the glove department. Based on his experience of less than 2 years, there was no traffic violations. My client wasn't under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Right off the bat, there was a communication problem. And it's not, he wasn't trying to deny his ID. He didn't understand what my client was saying. But the simple fact is, if you put someone in handcuffs, under my case law, what a reasonable man would think, you got me under handcuffs if you're hanging in front of your police car and you yet to tell me anything and you wait for another officer, I'm gonna assume that I'm under arrest. And at that point, his Miranda rights should be kicked in so he can decide if he's gonna answer questions or not. At least he knows his legal rights. As far as him only being asked once, well, you don't have to be asked twice. If you're scared, you'll answer right off the bat. But under the reasonable person point, if I was in handcuffs in the back, I'm thinking I'm going to get arrested. So at that point, second officer shows up, that rookie officer should have went and told the guy, hey, this is what he's being stopped for, let him know. Read him at Miranda rights. Instead, he just went straight, he started having a conversation like they're friends. Like, you're not my friend if you have me in handcuffs.
Mhm. But doesn't the conversation, as you said, as though they're friends, doesn't that speak to voluntariness, that it wasn't
No,
a that it wasn't an intense situation, at least from the officer's standpoint, and from your client's standpoint, it wasn't a contentious interaction.
I mean, from the officer standpoint, he's talking to you as a friend, but as far as the one in handcuffs, hey, you're afraid, you're going to, for all you know, you're being arrested. You don't know what you're being arrested for because no one has told you up to this point.
So are you saying that if there were no handcuffs on him and he consented to a search of the vehicle, then it would be legal?
Absolutely, Anna, because you feel more comfortable if you're in handcuffs. But you're handcuffed, with your hands behind your back with the lights on and the second officer shows up. I mean, any reasonable person would think he's gonna get arrested.
But with it, and let's talk a little bit about the language barrier. So the officer who communicated to him about the consent to search, that officer was a Spanish-speaking officer, and that officer spoke to him in Spanish?
Yes, Your Honor.
And that officer explained to him the consent to search form in Spanish?
No. He just
Right, what do you mean, no?
He just asked him, can we search your car? And he said, yes.
All right, so he understood that it was a consent to search form and he agreed to the search in Spanish.
He didn't sign no consent. It was all verbal, Spanish translation. But like I said, if you're under arrest, you don't know your rights, you're nervous, you're handcuffed, you're gonna cooperate with the officer under duress.
All right. This is what the court is going to decide. The court, based upon the evidence that was presented to the court, and the court has considered arguments of both sides, the court is going to deny the motion to suppress. Now, with regards to the evidence that was presented, counsel, you want to make closing arguments?
Just let me get my
Yes,
points. Whenever you're ready, Your Honor.
yes, I'm ready.
Your Honor, the issue before the court at this point, has the state proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt? I submit they have not.
Oh, if you'll slow down a little bit, because she's translating it then.
Regarding to the facts of the case, the officer saw my car traveling in a high crime area late at night. No, did not witness any traffic violation, just ran the plates and found that there was a expired sticker, so he initiated the stop. As the officer followed my client, he states he saw my client reaching into the glove department. The officer states that my client passed up several parking areas, public parking areas, well, they where he could have parked. But instead he pulled over on the side of the street. But at no time did he try to evade. He was driving slow enough for the officer to keep pace with him. Now, when the officer stated that he saw my client reaching into the glove department while he was driving, like back windows were tinted. It was his opinion that the light on his car showed shadows where he was extending into his glove department. But the video speaks for itself, John. When you look at the video, you can't see any shadows, people extending back and forth.
Mhm.
As a result of that, he believed he was in danger based on his less than 2 years experience as an officer, and approached the driver's side of my client and pulled him out and handcuffed him. But as you watch the video up to that point, my client had his hands on the wheels and was cooperative with the person. Remember, there was a language barrier as a result. of the language, as a result that he saw him reach into the alleged blood department, he pulled my client out, put him in handcuffs, took him to the front of his police car. And at which time he radioed for a second officer who spoke Spanish to come and help him. When the second officer arrived, no time did him or my client, and no time did this officer or the other officer tell him why he was being stopped and what he was being charged with. The officer just started to ask him questions. At this point, he asked my client if he, because during that conversation, my client told him that it wasn't his car, it was his boss's car, that he was borrowing it. When asked to search the vehicle, my client consented. This is still prior to any Miranda rights. During the search, the officer searched the front, the middle console, and underneath some stuff, he saw some paraphernalia, bong that he used to smoke. And based on his experience, he thought it was a drug paraphernalia. So based on that, he continued the search. He searched the front seat, he searched the glove compartment, he searched the back seat. Nothing until we reached up top where the glasses are, and he found some stuff. If it's testimony, we have this testimony to be truthful. We hold it officer's testimony to be truthful. Then the only movement that he saw my client do during the drive was reach for the glove department. Never did he reach for where the glasses should be. Well, all officers told him that he was stated that he did, and I think he was not under influence of any drugs or alcohol at the time. And the second officer spoke Spanish, which time when they found the drugs, should have read him his rights. Instead, they called in the third officer to read him his rights. Most people that borrow someone's car, they don't do an inventory check of the vehicle before they drive it, so they don't know what's in the car. Unfortunately, things like this happen. Based on the circumstances, Your Honor, I mean, if he's borrowing this car and the officer's only testimony, he saw him reaching the glove department and never looked up there. And if my client would have had drugs, we would probably told him he had drugs because he told him he can search the car. He was being honest with the guy. He wasn't aware of these drugs. Based on the circumstances, perhaps it can be my client's drugs, but that's not good enough to find him guilty. You can suspect it is my client's drugs because he is the only one in the car, but that's not good enough to find him guilty. My client is possibly guilty of possession of drugs, but that's not good enough to find him guilty, Your Honor. My client is probably guilty of possession of drugs, Your Honor, but that's still not good enough to find him guilty, Your Honor. My client is likely guilty of possession of drugs, Your Honor. That still doesn't reach the burden that the state has to prove that he's guilty. My client is highly likely guilty of possession of drugs, Your Honor. That still doesn't meet the standard for the state to meet to find my client guilty. And based on the testimony of the officer that we heard, Your Honor, the state has failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's that you find Carlos not guilty.
All right, state.
Your Honor, we have proved the elements of the indictment beyond a reasonable doubt. Beginning with the honor about January 2nd of 2025, Officer Johnston did testify that he was on patrol in uniform in a marked patrol vehicle on that date when he observed the motor vehicle that the defendant Carlos Vasquez Saldana was operating on a public roadway. Officer Johnston testified that he did run the license plate belonging to the vehicle and the registration came back as expired. And that is the reason for the traffic stop that he initiated. When he initiates his red and blue overhead lights, I think it is of significance that the defendant did not immediately pull over. And the state's exhibit, you can see that the defendant passes up two well-lit areas that were parking lots that he could have pulled into. And while it does not rise to the level of another offense, I think that lends to the officer's credibility of the furtive movements that he observed the defendant making during that time, and also to a consciousness of guilt. Now moving on, when Officer Johnston does initiate contact with the defendant. He does observe him in the driver's seat. There's nobody else in the vehicle. It did come out during testimony that the registered owner is not the defendant. However, he was in exclusive possession of the vehicle. I think that important facts that link the defendant to the car is you see in the state's exhibit that he's wearing a red hoodie that has a construction company. When the officer does search his person, he finds nails in the pocket. There's multiple tools in the car, linking the defendant to the car. Officer Garza does make the scene, and he is the second officer on scene. He's a Spanish-speaking officer that obtains the verbal consent to search. At that time, Officer Johnston goes to the car. He finds a pipe that is consistent with smoking narcotics. At that point, he takes it over, shows Officer Garza, and then he goes back and continues to search the car. When he's searching the car, the methamphetamine does fall down from the sunglasses case that is seized, sent off to the lab. And the forensic scientist did testify that it was 0.253 grams of methamphetamine. Now regarding the affirmative link, or what affirmatively links the possession of the narcotics of the methamphetamine to the defendant, is that broken piece of the pipe that Officer Garza testified that he seized from the defendant's pocket. And so that goes to the intentionally and knowing of the indictment. And so we have proved this case beyond a reasonable doubt, and we ask that you find the defendant guilty.
All right. The court will find the defendant guilty. If you could pull a trial court certification of defendant's rights to appeal, please. And then we'll move into sentencing.
Okay.
All right, the court having found the defendant guilty, state, what are you requesting for punishment?
Judge, the defendant does not have any criminal history or any prior felony convictions. And so I think under 42A.551, he is mandatory community supervision. So we're just asking for 2 years probated for 2 years.
We're asking for 1 year probation, Your Honor.
The minimum is 2. So-
We're in agreement there.
All right, sure. So the court will sentence you to 2 years in the state jail facility, suspended and then probated for 2 years. There's to be regular reporting by Zoom or in person, regular random UAs, proof of employment within 30 days, no employment as a home health care provider or with minors, field visits 1 time per month for 3 months, a TAP evaluation in custody, follow recommendations. And your client is not a citizen, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And there's to be no illegal re-entry into the United States. Probation, is there anything else? All right, Mr. Saldana, did you review the document entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal with your attorney? Did you understand it and sign it?
Yes.
All right. And counsel, were you ever able to explain this document to your client in in Spanish?
Yes, I use the translator, so there's no mistake, Your Honor.
Great, thank you. All right, you do have a limited right to appeal. Well, not a limited right to appeal. You have a right to appeal because this was a bench trial. And also you have a right to appeal the court's rulings, any of the court's rulings. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right, because this is a conviction, you're not allowed to own or possess any weapons or ammunition. If you have a question over what a weapon or ammunition is, you'll need to speak to an attorney. Do you understand?
Okay.
All right, good luck to you. Thank you.
May I excuse you?
Yes.
Thank you.